We are back in business, and they should be able to hear us now. Okay. Just send us a nice little sweet message in the chat room if you can hear us okay. But I'm getting good signals over here on this end. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, we're going to go ahead and go because we're showing we've got stuff going out now, and that's what I wasn't getting a while ago. So we have read so far verses 7, 8, 9, and 10. So let's continue through. Miss Kathy, if you would read for us 11 through 13.
I am coming quickly. Hold fast what you have, so that no one will take your crown. He who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God, and he will not go out from it any more. And I will write on him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my God and my new name.
Okay, and 13.
He has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches.
Very good, thank you. All right, let's back up there to verse 7 now. A couple of things. This is a very interesting and very helpful letter in regards to us and the applications to us there. And okay, so notice first off, he says to the angel of the church in Philadelphia. If we were to look at a map of the 7 churches, we would still be on what some scholars say be a traveling route. You know, imagine if you were going to talk to someone about going from here to Dallas. What would be the primary road to take from here to Dallas? I-35. Would you go through other cities? Sure, it's kind of like that. Maybe taking Route 66. You know that if you follow this path, you'll then hit this city, then that one, and that one. So some say that these cities were in basically a travel route or a commerce route, from one to the other. So in that being the case, we have now reached a point to where we are in Philadelphia. Now he says here, as just a repeat, or not the repeat, but a continuation in the description of Jesus, these things says he who is holy, he who is true, he who has the key of David, he who opens and no one shuts, and shuts and no one opens. Now, when we look at that particular verse there for just a moment, what is the great thing that's being said there regarding Jesus? Essentially, what one word could you use to sum up what he's saying about Jesus? Probably not the best question, but...
Truth.
Truth, okay. All right, what else?
He's holy.
Okay, he's holy. All right.
All-powerful.
All-powerful. Okay.
All authority.
2 words. That's right. All authority.
Yeah.
All right. Try this, though, and this is, see if this makes sense. Do you see the word access in that description?
For the key.
Exactly. Okay. The person who follows Jesus is the person who follows him who has the key of David, the one who opens and no one shuts, and shuts and no one opens. Access to the kingdom of heaven, entrance into the kingdom of heaven, and entrance into our eternal abode in heaven. Okay? And so, and this is what we have to keep in mind. We're talking about the book of Romans and what it is all about. It's all about victory in Jesus Christ. That no matter what the world does to us, we will overcome. The Romans, the Romans government under Domitian tried to extinguish Christianity and failed. Okay, they tried to stop Christians, but they failed in that task because true followers of God will never fail. They will always overcome, and hence the word "overcome" throughout all these letters. All right, any thoughts or comments?
Well, that's the same thing that Christ prophesied. I lost the words now.
But it is. This is.
He would build his church and Satan would not overcome it. That would.
Yeah.
That's the sense of it, but I lost the exact word right now.
The gates of Hades would not prevail against that. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah. There in Matthew chapter 16, right around in verse 18 there. And ultimately, whether we're talking about Hades being the realm of the dead, death is not going to stop the church. If we're going to talk about Hades as being hell, hell's not going to be able to stop the church. As long as a person is following Christ, he will always have victory in that. Yeah. All right, any other thoughts?
So even during the persecution, in the medieval persecution in the 400, 500, 600, 700, the church was not overcome.
That's right.
It still existed.
And not in the form of the great denominations of the day. You know, we got to keep that in mind. Someone said, well, yeah, look at how great the Catholic Church was. Look at the Reformation movement and all the churches there. That wasn't what Jesus was talking about. True believers, following the Word the way Christ taught it, would always be present. Yeah. Dan?
I think to add to what you just said, in verse 8, the door will be kept open for who? And
yes.
It says, those who keep my word.
That's right.
That's who the door will be kept open for. The door will be shut, on the other hand, to those who do not keep his word.
Exactly.
Man can't shut it.
No, man cannot shut it. The door is held open and shut by Jesus. And he's the one that has control over the door.
You don't want to use something as silly as the phrase password. Key is better. But the door is only open to those who have the key, and that key is what's provided by Christ. Yeah, and I should say he has opened the door, and only those that answer can go in. That's right.
See, Peter was given the keys. You know, they tried to make him out, but he was just giving out what he'd been told.
Exactly.
You know,
yeah.
So that's the only time I could. What other time do you think that key was used like that?
I think what Jesus was telling Peter and the apostles is effectively, and this is what he says, and also in Matthew 18, that whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. So from the point of the day of Pentecost...
Will have been there. Will have been bound. Right? Isn't that what that means?
Yes, exactly. Or has already been bound. Mm-hmm. Exactly, yeah. It would be like a legal representative telling you the law. He didn't establish the law, but he represents the law.
Right.
And so therein on the day of Pentecost, they began with the key. Giving people the keys to the kingdom of heaven, or the entrance therein. All right, any other thoughts? All right, let's look now in verse 8. Oh, there was something I wanted to share with you about the city of Philadelphia. One thing, a little note that I've got on it is that Philadelphia was briefly named Neo Caesar, as in Caesar's new city. But Jesus here in his, let me jump down a little bit. Philadelphia lies near a fertile valley, especially suited for growing wine grapes. Inscriptions from Philadelphia mention worship of Zeus and Hestia, and the Roman imperial cult was already present by the 1st century AD. An inscription from a nearby town mentions a synagogue in that town. Christians in Philadelphia later received a letter from the early church fathers Ignatius in AD 110, and they suffered during the martyrdom of Polycarp in 155. Now, what is interesting about this is they're on the verge of a great persecution, if it hadn't already begun under Domitian. And they're going to get a little bit extra comfort, you know, if we take it as literal as it sounds here. Okay. So let's look there at verse 8 there. As Dan pointed out, Jesus says there to them, he says, I know your works. See, I have set before you an open door, and no one can shut it. For you have a little strength, have kept my word, and have not denied my name. Now, as with all the other churches, what did Jesus know about the brethren in Philadelphia?
He knew their works.
Exactly.
Their heart.
Yeah. Their works were before him. He saw the works, saw their life, saw what they did, saw what they thought. He saw the culmination of who they were. And so he says to them, see, I have set before you a what? An open door. Now, there are some times when you look at like the writings of the Apostle Paul, an open door is reference to an opportunity to preach the word. Notice with me here for just a moment. I've got to get my keyboard over. I knew something was missing. I knew I had too much space. There we go. Notice over in 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 9. The Apostle Paul says, For a great and effective door has been opened to me, and there are many adversaries. Okay? And if we look over in, let's see, 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 2, we see essentially here the same thing. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, and notice there with me in verse, what's that?
Chapter 2, verse 12. You got the
Verse 12. I got it backwards. Thank you. So he says, now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is born from God, that we might know the things that have been freely given to us by God. Is that the right one?
No.
No, that's 1 Corinthians, isn't it?
Furthermore, when I came to
Thank
Troas
you.
to preach Christ's gospel, and a door was opened to me by the Lord.
All right. We need to quit having things go wrong. Let me get back to my point. I'm going to get distracted from the point. Things keep messing up here. All right. So normally when we think of a door being open, we think of evangelistic opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
But what in the context would suggest that this is talking about something different than that? And Dan, you touched on this in verse 7.
Well, the open door here that no one can shut is actually the key to heaven. That's how we gain our reward, is through an open door that is shut for some and open for some, depending on your works.
Exactly, yeah.
Peter
Gene?
also said at the day of Pentecost that Christ now was sitting on David's throne. So there you get the key of David.
Very good point. That's right. The throne of David, not the figurative throne,
That's right.
but remember David for a moment. He was, what was he over Israel? King over Israel. And he wasn't the first king, but he was the first king. In what context?
He was righteous.
No?
Lineage.
The lineage. Exactly. He was the first king that was appointed from Judah. What tribe was Solomon from? Not Solomon. I'm sorry, Saul.
Saul.
What tribe was Saul from?
Benjamin.
Yeah, tribe of Benjamin. So David was the first official king that was appointed from the tribe of Judah. And so in a figurative sense, Jesus now takes that position, in a figurative sense, in heaven, sitting on the throne of David. Okay?
Yeah, if you run the lineage down from the promise to Abraham, it goes through David, not through any of the other kings. It goes through David.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
To the birth of Jesus.
That's right, yeah. Gene? Okay. All right, let's see. Any other thoughts? So the idea here, I know your works. See, I've set before you an open door. No one can shut it. For you have a little strength, have kept my word, and have not denied my name. So this open door that he just spoke of in verse 7 has been opened unto them. All right, their access to him, their fellowship in him, their access to the body of Christ, to the kingdom. All this is made available unto them. And he says there that essentially no one can take it away from them. No one can shut it. For you have a little strength, have kept my word, and have not denied my name. What are your thoughts on the phrase, a little strength?
They were few in numbers, what I would think.
Okay, all right, few in number there.
But because they still had the truth, that wasn't diminished at all.
Okay.
So what would be the little would be the numbers that they had, people that they had, how many members they had.
To me, that would make the most sense, because when you think about what he said to the church there in Smyrna, over in the second chapter there, notice there in verse, back up there to verse 8. Yeah. He says, I know your works, tribulation, and poverty, but you are rich. Okay? The church in Smyrna suffered, but yet they were spiritually rich. The church in Laodicea has a name that they are alive, but they are dead. Exactly. In this case in point, the fact that they have a little strength, he wasn't talking spiritual strength, but more than likely the numbers. I
I thought they were in a minority. Because he
Minority,
talks about
yeah.
the synagogue of Satan and
Exactly. Based on at least the way some scholars look at this section here, they were being persecuted not only by the idol worshippers, but also by the Jews. The Jews there at that local synagogue. maybe turning them in, maybe making it harder on them in one way or the other. But they were in the minority. But despite that, they had kept his word. They hadn't given in to idolatry. They hadn't turned to what the other churches had turned to, or some of the other ones. And they had not denied his name. They were willing to stand fast no matter what it was that they faced.
The Greek word there for little is micros, from which we get microscope.
There you go. Okay.
So it's small. It's they are the minority, or the small, or the micro.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. So with that being the case, then he says there in verse 9, "Indeed, I will make those of synagogue of Satan, who say they are Jews but are not, but lie, that is. Indeed, I will make them come and worship before your feet, and to know that I have loved you." So the idea of the synagogue of Satan, I believe this is another figurative phrase. I don't believe that there was an actual synagogue where they came in and worshipped the devil. Okay, they were Jews. They called themselves Jews, but they were not. And scholars speculate they were persecuting the Christians as well as everyone else. They were making life difficult on the Christians. They were working against Christ. And as Jesus says, if we are not for him, we are what?
Against him.
We are against him, exactly.
And he said before, you are of your father, the devil.
Yes.
So actually they're trying, or they think they're serving the Lord, but they're not actually serving the Lord, they're serving Satan.
Exactly. Exactly.
And if they would not have promoted their synagogue as the synagogue of Satan, they would have promoted it as God's synagogue. You know, but
Well, we're the true worshipers of the true God. These Christians aren't.
right.
You know, these Christians worship some man who claimed to be the Son of God. You can kind of see that within their charge there. And maybe at that point, maybe they, and I can see this, oh, they're idol worshipers just like all the other idol worshipers. They're worshiping some man who claimed to be the Son of God. They just don't have a temple. You know, I'm saying you could see them kind of possibly doing that.
To take that into today's world, it's kind of harsh, but if you are not serving the Lord, there's only two choices. You're either serving the Lord or serving the devil.
That's right.
One of the two. And
Yeah.
that's very harsh for the people of this world today to realize. If you're not doing God's will, you're doing Satan's will.
Exactly. That's
And
exactly right.
if you're that, if you say it that plainly to them, sometimes you make enemies. You kind of need to season your speech with salt,
Yeah.
and not tell them, well, you're just a bunch of Satan worshipers. You have to go to them and say, if you're not serving the Lord, who are you serving? You know, or ask them a question.
Yeah.
If you've got to be right, or you're wrong. There's just black and white, truth and false teachings. There's, you know, there's no in between.
Well,
Gray area.
yeah, that's right. There's no gray area. But think about this, though. This is the first time that we see the phrase synagogue of Satan. Not the first time he used it earlier in the letters. But like when Paul wrote the letter to the churches of Galatia, he didn't call the Jews the synagogue of Satan. You know, I think there may have been more that they were doing than simply not accepting the teachings of Jesus Christ. Or enough time had gone by that they were now rejecting God. You know, you think about Paul. Paul faithfully served God even when he was putting Christians to death or consenting to their arrest and their death. He was doing it with a good conscience, but he was still wrong. And you may have the people here that enough time has gone by that even their conscience, you know, I mean, it's just seared against the truth. Miss Pat and then Rhonda.
That's what I was thinking about, how strong hold the Jewish religion had in the world because of their past history. Everybody knew that they were people of God. So they would be the worst enemies of Christianity that there was.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Because of their influence and
Yeah.
their back history.
That's right. Rhonda?
I was just, you sort of did, I was just going to point out in Revelation 2, verse 9, to the church at Smyrna, he tells them they're going to be dealing with the synagogue of Satan also.
Yeah.
You know, what it is it's people who are claiming to be followers of God. But when I read it, I see it as they're claiming to be followers of God, but they're doing it for evil reasons.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to say, what would be worse than directing your own life in service to the devil would be to take a whole bunch of people with you to do the same thing.
Yeah.
That's why false teaching is so bad. It's because you're not only hurting yourself, you're hurting all of those who follow you.
Yeah. That's right. Gene?
And one of the difficulties that Dan talks about too is with human nature is if the punishment that's warned is not immediate, it doesn't become as significant to you. So Christians could be warned about what they face at the point of death, but if it doesn't happen right now, then it's not significant to them. So
Yeah.
there's always the danger, well, tomorrow is tomorrow, and we'll worry about that tomorrow. And of course, tomorrow never comes, according to the proverb.
Yeah. One other thought on this, and then we'll move on. It's interesting that he does say, who say they are Jews and are not. Which again, I think singles them out in what they were doing, singles them separate from the average Jew, if that makes sense. I mean, if someone who is
Faithful Jew.
average, that's not really the right term, but in other words, there may have there still were Jews at this time who were said. Well, I use the term faithful extremely carefully. Okay, unless we're talking about Jews that were converted to Christ. In this context here, he's either talking about spiritual Jews, when he says they say they're Jews and they're not, referencing the not, meaning they're not the spiritual Jews that Paul talks about, one that is circumcised of the heart, not of the flesh. But he could mean that they call themselves Jews, but the Jews don't even behave this way, and maybe it's talking about whatever it is that they were doing, going beyond what the normal Jewish person would be doing. If that makes sense.
That would have been your leadership, though. See, that was how he persecuted Jesus. It'd be like, it can't be the infidels or the people that are, they don't care, because it'd be like today, well, you can worship whatever God you want to. They don't have any vested interest in that.
Right.
So the only place where there was a synagogue is where the Jews were. I mean, that's where they went to worship, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And also, during this time, you went from the children of Israel, which was physical children of Israel, to the spiritual children of Israel, which were the new Christians under the new law. And it could be that they were claiming to be, if you used Israel interchangeably with Jews here, it could mean that they were claiming to be Christians, but they're not.
Right.
Something to that effect.
It could be, although he would have been a little more direct than that.
It could have been.
It is a synagogue with Jews, and they say they're Jews, but they're not. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I see your point.
No.
They're not.
Because that goes back to what Jesus was telling him, that they were doing all these rituals, they were doing all these things that really weren't even their law, that was their custom.
That's
Yeah.
What they
exactly
decided
right.
to do.
That's
Yeah.
a good point, Kathy, because they did come out with their traditions that they held as law.
Yeah.
And that made them not.
Yep. And they may have been bowing to the pressures of the idol worshipers and giving in, and doing things that were against even the law of Moses, but making it justified in their own minds. Yeah. Gene.
Yeah, back in chapter 2, verse 9, he said, I know thy works and tribulation and poverty, that thou art rich, and I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, or the synagogue of Satan. So he even goes to the extent of saying that's blaspheming God because of what their claims are.
To the church there in Smyrna.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. And we, you're going to have a lot of people who call themselves and claim to be children of God who are not. But in this case in point, I mean, they had gone to a point that he calls them a synagogue of Satan. And interestingly enough, he does put them on the par with non-believers at this point. He says, indeed, I will make them come and worship before your feet, and to know that you know that I have loved you. Okay? Now, what are your thoughts on this wonderful enigmatic verse? Is it enigmatic? I think that's right.
I don't know, is there another word to describe what you're saying?
Mysterious?
Can you break it down?
All right. Now, okay, many people look at this and kind of see a promise there that, if taken quite literally, would mean that at some point that these individuals who are the synagogue of Satan would actually be bowing down and worshiping before the feet of Christians. Okay, and specifically the people there in Philadelphia. But the reality is, this is a figurative statement. Okay. Not that the people would literally be worshiping before the feet of Christians, but he's showing that these Christians would be accepted by God and the others would be rejected. You think about Paul's statement where he says that at the name of Jesus, every knee shall bow. Those above the earth and those under the earth, and he goes on and talks about that. Well, imagine the scene when the Lord comes again. Okay? If we halfway understand what the Bible teaches in the vision that it gives to kind of illustrate that which is going to be spiritual, you can see all of us bowing before Jesus. But all those whom he loves will stand up, and everyone else will continue to bow. Not bowing in true worship, but out of fear, if that makes sense. That type of, it is by compulsion they will do it, whereas Christians serve by choice and by willingness. We, Christians, are the one whom the Lord has loved because they have turned to him and follow him. Everyone else will not be accepted by the Lord. And in that sense, we see a comparison to where these will be humbled before these. And that may be what he's talking about there.
It's no longer an enigma.
That's right.
You've explained it. There's no mystery.
Well, if that explanation is right. Any other thoughts? Okay. And again, it's all about victory, isn't it? Okay. It's kind of like, sometimes you'll see these shows or maybe think about some bully at school, and the bully keeps picking on this wimpy kid. Well, eventually they both grow up, and the wimpy kid becomes the wealthy doctor who has to operate on the bully because he's been beaten up in a local bar fight. It's one of those cases where the meek shall inherit the earth type situation will be the ones received, accepted by God, and the others will be humbled and rejected.
That's a pretty good analogy because they were bullies.
Yeah, in matter of speaking, yeah.
Just a short common definition. It says, don't pretend to be something you're not.
That's true. And if you are a Christian, you be a Christian.
That's right.
You live it. If you are a Christian but you live as the world, then and you're no better in some ways than what the very ones we're looking at. Yeah.
John, would 1 Corinthians 6:2 kind of go along with that when it says, or do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if the world is to be judged by you, are you incompetent to try trivial cases? The saints will judge the world.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of that attitude of, because we obeyed, we did what God commanded, we served him.
Well, that's right. Think about...
They will be
Go ahead.
judged.
Give me time to think, Dan.
Okay. The world will be judged by the pattern
Right.
of the saints.
Because the saints
Because
lived
the
up to the
saints live by
pattern
the pattern of Christ.
Christ.
Let me get my straight. Jesus, I think, talks about this. Didn't he say that the inhabitants of Sodom and Gomorrah, Nineveh, I'm sorry, the inhabitants of Nineveh will judge this current generation, talking about the Pharisees, because they listened during the days of Jonah and repented, but the current generation of Pharisees would hear the Son of Man and not repent. And so in a manner of speaking, the inhabitants of Nineveh will judge the current generation of Pharisees in a manner of speaking. And I was thinking that there was another passage over in Hebrews, and it'll come to me later, but basically it talks about how that basically the righteous will scarcely be saved. Well, if judgment begins at the household of God with us, then what's going to happen with everyone else who hasn't been following God? And I was thinking that might be in Hebrews chapter 12, but I'm not so sure if that's the case, so we won't go on.
It's because that your life, is living as a Christian is like a testament of God's word. And so whenever every knee shall bow, it's going to bow to Christ. And because you're on Christ's side, then that's how that happens. So it's not like we're not worthy of worship.
Right.
But it's His word and the life and the testament of the life that you have being a Christian. That's why.
That's
We
exactly
talk about
right.
the sheep and the goats, and one's going to one side and one's going to the other. Well, they're all going to be on the other side, and they're going to have to bow down to God and to Christ, and we're going to be with Him.
That's right. That's exactly right.
1 Peter 1:17.
1 Peter 1:17. Well, if Peter's the mysterious writer of Hebrews, I was close, but not likely though. Notice over there in 1 Peter 1:17. Is that right, Rhonda? Yeah. This may be what I was thinking about. And if you call on the Father who without partiality judges according to each one's works, conduct yourself throughout the time of your stay here in fear, knowing that you are not redeemed with corruptible things like silver or gold from the aimless conduct received by the tradition of your fathers, but the precious blood of Christ is of a lamb without blemish and without spot. He indeed was foreordained before the...
Where are you reading?
I thought 1 Peter 1:17. That's what, okay.
That's where you're reading.
All right, so that's not the right one.
1 Peter 4:17.
Okay. Did your iPhone get it right this time? No, I'm kidding.
Did I say 4? I'm sorry.
You may have said 1.
I'm sorry if I said 1. It's
I mean, you may have said 4. Okay. 4:17. For the time has come for judgment to begin at the house of God. Yeah, that's it right there. Because and we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, in regards to suffering. Okay, we may suffer as a Christian. He says, for the time has come for judgment to begin at the house of God. All right, for if it begins with us first, what will be the end of those who do not obey the gospel of God? Now, if the righteous one is scarcely saved, where will the ungodly and the sinner appear? Therefore, let those who suffer according to the will of God commit their souls to Him in doing good as to a faithful Creator. Thank you. I know I'd read it recently in the study, but I had it completely in the wrong location. So the point is that in a manner of speaking, we will judge the world in that we are the ones, and Kathy will explain it a while ago, we are the ones that have accepted Christ. And we have established that. No, we have followed that standard. And if we can follow the standard, everyone else can follow the standard as well. Yeah. All right, any other thoughts? All right, so let's continue there. He then says there in verse 3, verse 10, because you have kept my command to persevere, I also will keep you from the hour of trial which shall come upon the whole world to test those who dwell on the earth. All right, so he says, because you have kept what? My command to persevere. He says, I also will keep you from that hour of trial. We have a command from the Lord to persevere. Okay? So we'll write the word persevere up here. It's as crucial to our lives because without perseverance, what will happen to us? What will we do if we don't persevere?
Fall away.
Exactly, fall away. Okay? Let's say you've been given a very daunting task and you cannot afford to not complete the task. And you may be tired, you may grow weary, you may stumble, you may fall, but you're still expected to complete the task. You persevere through that process so that when you get to the end, the task is done. And you are rewarded for that perseverance. Well, they have persevered. So He will keep them from the hour of trial, and we'll talk about that. Any thoughts or comments, though, about this perseverance? So you've obeyed my command to persevere. Any thoughts? Same command for us today? Okay. Yeah. Now,
Keep on keeping on.
exactly. You keep on keeping on. Now, if this was under the time period of Nero's reign, then it would have been the persecution that was coming upon by the Jewish leaders. And a little bit of Nero because he blamed the burning of Rome on the Christians. Okay. But it was written during the time of Domitian's reign. Domitian began the wide-scale persecution of all things Christian because they refused to bow down to worship him. And one commentator I read one time, and I think I mentioned this, they would have viewed Christians as atheists because they didn't believe in the Roman God. They didn't believe in Caesar as a God, so they were atheists. And it wasn't that they believed in another God, it was that they weren't willing to worship him. And so he began the wide-scale persecution. Why do you put down a small revolt?
Because it grows if you don't.
Exactly. And so that's why he tried to stop them. Because imagine the disrespect that would begin to grow if he let this religious sect of people not pay him homage that he felt like he was due. So now imagine perseverance under that framework and that scope. Okay. Completely different in form than anything that we have faced within our lifetime. Completely different. For us, that is. Any thoughts, Dale? No? Any comments? All right, let's talk about the latter part now of this verse. He says, in talking to the church, the brethren there in Philadelphia, I also will keep you from the hour of trial which shall come upon the whole world to test those who dwell on the earth. Okay. This passage has been viewed by some within the premillennialist world to kind of talk about, to be referencing the silent rapture. You know, the premillennialists believe in that silent rapture where all the faithful will rise up to be with the Lord. They'll be taken away, and then you've got the 7.5 good years and 7.5 bad years, and then the great battle of Armageddon. But that's not what he's talking about. If the persecution was as great as what scholars say that it was under Domitian's reign, could this be viewed as simply him saying that they would be spared some?
Sounds reasonable.
Yeah. Think about to the church in Sardis. He said, you will spend 10 days in jail, essentially in prison, indicating in effect that it wasn't a long term, but that it was going to be something limited, something bearable. Enigmatic. That was in the chat room. What I tried to say a while ago. Yeah.
That's what you said.
That's what I said. It just sounded more, you don't know what you're talking about type word.
It's an enigma, a mystery. And then
Exactly.
There you go.
Yeah.
Pertaining to a mystery.
That's true. Miss Pat.
Well, doesn't verse 10 set the tone for this next verse? The one you're talking about?
Yes. In a manner of speaking. Okay.
Well, I mean, the rest of even the beginning of what we just studied.
Yeah.
It seems like it sets a certain context for it, to view it in that context.
Well, when you look at verse 11, let's go ahead and bring that in. That's a good point to keep in consideration there. He says here in verse 11, behold, I am coming quickly. Hold fast what you have, that no one may take your crown. All right. Here is kind of the big question. Is he talking about the end? Okay? Where you have his return and you have judgment. Okay? When he says, behold, I am coming quickly. All right? And we talk about that. We believe in the Lord coming again, and we have to be ready for that. And when you look at it, that's kind of what he's talking about. It's just quickly is a very relative phrase. All right, very relative phrase there in our look at time. But if that's the case, then we come back up there to verse 10. And so he says, I will keep you from the hour of trial, which shall come upon the whole world. And we see the word trial here. It's not going to be, well, I'm saying I don't think it's the judgment trial as is the test that's going to come upon the whole world. What are your thoughts, though?
I think the whole world here throws us.
Okay.
Because I think we're thinking about the whole world.
Okay.
To them, the whole world was the Roman Empire.
Okay.
Pretty much
All
all
right.
it
So I
was.
think it's talking about the Roman Empire as being the whole world.
Okay. And the Roman Empire is going to fall,
Yeah.
if it's talking about
And
them.
the trials coming upon them, he will keep them from, because they're not part of that.
Okay. All right. Any other hands? Dale, did you have your hand up? No? Okay. All right.
Well, if he's not,
Yes. Mm-hmm. No, go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I go back and I look at that verse 5 and it's talking about, I will not blot his name out of the book of life. To
Mhm.
me, it's talking about the end. I mean,
The end there.
Judgment.
Yeah. Okay. Let's say for the sake of argument, and that would really fit better in some ways as far as understanding these two verses, to say that I also will keep you from the hour of trial, the judgment, that will come upon the whole world to test those who dwell on the earth. That would make it nice and neat and tie together very well with verse 11, behold, I am coming quickly. Okay. Where we are thrown a little bit of a loop is if the phrase, I am coming quickly, does not refer to the hour of trial that's coming upon the earth. In other words, if this was written during the time of the Domitian reign there, then one might say that the persecution, that Domitian, and it lasted, what, nearly 200 years it was on, lasted up until Constantine. Now, it had moments of where it ebbed and it kind of waned a little bit, but then times when it got really strong again. So it would last for about 200 some odd years. I need to go back and look exactly at that. But the Roman oppression of Christians, in a manner of speaking, did hit the whole of the world, but really the whole of the world wasn't a Christian world, if you would, and so not everybody fell under that sway. So I'm going to have to say that what we're looking at here probably does refer to the hour of trial, that hour of judgment, despite what I said a while ago.
Yeah, if you add crown in there, I think you're right.
Yeah.
That's the crown that we're talking about there is
Yeah. Continuing the same thought there.
Right.
Behold, I'm coming quickly. Hold fast what you have, that no one may take away your crown.
crown.
Yeah.
And the crown is always associated with your letting,
Yep.
being saved.
And tie this crown back to how they would bow and worship before your feet, in a manner of speaking, what he said earlier. This exaltation of his sorts. Yes, Gene?
I would suggest that in verse 11, where it says, I come quickly, the definition of that word would almost mean, I come surely.
Okay.
Quick.
So you've got to be prepared. Hold fast to that which you have, because I come surely.
Yeah.
Rather than being an immediate thing,
Yeah.
it becomes an absolute.
Okay. Instead of so much a reference of time as in like soon or something.
Yeah.
That's possible. Yeah. That's possible. But again, in the time frame of deity, 2,000 years, 3,000 years, 4,000 years. More if you look at people's death, and maybe if we focused on death rather than judgment, judgment may not come within our lifetime, but we're fairly certain death will come within our lifetime, so to speak, And so there is a certainty there that judgment will come swiftly.
And life is but a vapor. I mean, you stop and think about it in those
Yeah.
terms. We don't have long on this earth to serve God. It is quick.
Yeah.
We in our way of thinking, 80 years might look like a long time. 90 years, 100 years, it's a blink.
Yeah.
And that word also, in the original Greek, also means by surprise.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Quickly, suddenly, by surprise.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Like he says, he would come like a thief.
thief in the night.
Yeah.
So,
That's right.
that's the same word that is translated without their knowing or by surprise.
Yeah. Now there is one other possible way of looking at this, and then we'll go ahead and close the study today here at the end of verse 12 there in just a moment. And depending on what commentator you look at, he could get this right. Alex Ogden, in his commentary, puts the writing at about 68 AD, and what God is promising is judgment upon Jerusalem to avenge the blood of the apostles and prophets. Now, let's say if it was written and that's what it was about, well, it was fulfilled when the temple of Jerusalem was destroyed, okay? And so under that context, Christians had a victory that day, okay? That would have been the trial. Homer Haley, in his commentary, puts it about 98 AD and believes that it is promising victory over the Roman Empire. And he views the fall of the Roman Empire as being brought about by the will of God. And so one may say then, in that case in point, the hour of trial that's coming upon the whole world is referencing the Roman Empire paying, if you would, for their having punished the Christians. And so if you'll endure during this time period, the whole of the world will be judged, or the Roman Empire will be judged and made to pay for what they've done to you. Not judgment, but in them being in their fall. That's just another way of looking at that. I tend to think it's more of what we're discussing here, but I can see that as well too. Miss Kathy?
What do you think about this on James 1:12? It said, "Blessed is a man who perseveres under trial, for once he has been approved." Oh, wait a minute, I got the wrong. He will receive the crown of life, which the Lord has promised to those who love him. See, when I'm thinking he's talking about holding on to your crown, when you talk about the perseverance and the judgment, all of the things that were happening to him in the world, in a way he was protecting his son, because that trial isn't necessarily going to come upon you. You're my people, just like he's protected his people all along. But he's saying hold fast, because you don't want them to take that crown that you're trying to get to go to heaven when you die.
Amen.
So that's just what I think that's what it was saying.
I think that's a very good way of looking at that.
I think that's exact. I do.
Yeah, good way of looking at that. Gene?
I think it extends that on to beyond, into ultimately the end of time, because verse 12 talks, "I will write upon him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, which is New Jerusalem."
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which
So
comes down, which cometh down out of heaven.
That's where you'll receive your crown
Okay.
in the New Jerusalem.
So I think in that point he's talking about the dangers immediate, the need to remain faithful, but still the result of faithfulness is the end of time.
That's right. That's right.
I think he switches back and forth myself.
See, because he's talking about the immediate danger. He's talking about who's the ones that are persecuting him, and I know that you've done what I told you to do, and I'm watching out for you. So hang on, because this is going to be what you'll have in the end.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and I think it could be either one. I mean, they're interchangeable.
It's going back and forth.
All right.
The victory here, the physical victory on earth, gives you the spiritual victory to heaven.
Okay. All right.
He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith in the churches.
Yeah, that's right. Miss Pat?
I think you get in
Yep.
trouble when you try to lock it into either one of those thoughts. I think to blend it is a better way to keep yourself in a more even keel with what it's being said. Like
Okay.
it's talking about right now, and then it's talking about the future too. It's talking to the people that are under persecution at that time.
Okay.
And that's the ones he's really trying to help. Because we're going to be okay with the scriptures written. I mean, we've got it to read and understand, so we're going to...
Assuming that we keep the faith.
That's true.
true.
That's
That's true.
key right there. It's the
What's
faith.
the key? That's the
Yeah.
key.
Um,
Where is it? Is that 2 Peter 10?
2 Peter chapter 10?
Is that where it is?
Not likely.
No.
Not that many chapters.
There's no
That's like Jude too.
Yeah, 2, 4,
Oh, you talking about 2 Peter chapter 3?
3, chapter 3, verse 10. Is that what we're talking about? That God is long suffering?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
That's 3:10.
Yeah, roughly in that passage there. Yeah. Not only that any should perish, but...
Said the verses
Yeah.
of chapter. But,
Yeah.
he said, they were saying, we've always heard that Christ is coming, and they were saying, where is this second coming? When is
Yeah.
he coming? They were getting a little bit,
Like we are.
wondering when it's going to be. Come on, you said it's going to be.
Impatient.
Yeah.
So they were getting impatient, so he told them. He said,
Well, let me share with you one final thought, one final way of looking at this, and it kind of pulls in what everybody's saying.
Yeah.
But I think that you could also look at this and tell them and see that he's telling them that they have victory now. Okay, and you think about the promise, the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, ultimately talked about the victory of that great kingdom, didn't it? Okay. Not a victory of a kingdom that would come once the Lord comes again and judges the world. Then there'll be this great kingdom. but it'd be a kingdom established over the whole of the earth, and that kingdom was the church, wasn't it? Okay? And so, in that context, in a manner of speaking, what he could be talking about is the victory. He's judging the whole of the world. You know, it's not he will reign. He is reigning. He is judging the whole of the world. We have a crown. We are part of that. We are in that kingdom. We are, look at verse 12 there, aren't we pillars in the temple of God? We say the church is the temple of God. And we are in, and we shall go out no more, as long as we are faithful to that. And he writes his name upon us. And there are some instances where the church is referenced as the New Jerusalem. When you look back to the prophecies in the minor prophets, okay, the new heavens, not new heavens, new earth, but the New Jerusalem. And that could be viewed as the church, and it came down out of heaven, from a manner of speaking. And so the point is, and I will write on him my new name. Well, Jeremiah 31, verse 31, I believe it is. We have, or in that context there, we have a new name.
We have Christian as a new name.
Yeah, the name of Christ, the name of
That's his name.
Yeah.
We're named after him.
So we know that we will have victory in heaven, but we have victory now. As long as we are within the church. The church is incomplete, waiting to be complete. It is as God would have it to be, and it is in effect, the kingdom of Christ is established, the kingdom of heaven is, and then the time will come where he'll turn it back over to his Father. So I think what everybody says, very good points, I think it's right on the money. It's the victory that we have both now and then, as long as we persevere and do not deny his name. All right, any other thoughts? All right, let's plan next Tuesday. Let me think. Next Tuesday, though, is the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. Is that right? Okay. I think we normally take that class day off because of the possibility of people cooking and things like that.
And out of town.
Huh?
And out of town.
And out of town. That's right. So we'll hold off next week's class, and then we'll resume on the following Tuesday, which should be the 3rd, December 3rd. Sound good? All right. We'll plan to resume this on December 3rd with less technical difficulties at the start. I'll make sure of that.
Since we're in the book of Revelation, there will be as many enigmas, though.
Thanks, Dan. You're right. It's the word of the day. And so we'll start on December 3rd, verse 14 of chapter 3. All right. Appreciate everyone coming and participation. And remember the Scripture Way broadcast tonight at 7:30 at scriptureway.org. Let's go ahead and bow for a word of prayer. And Brother Gene, would you mind dismissing us in that prayer?
Our Heavenly Father, we're thankful to Thee for Thy Word, for the promises we have of life after death, eternity with Thee in heaven. We pray that we might work each day with patience to receive that promise which Thou hast made to us of the life which is to come. Pray that Thou would bless our lives, bless our service to Thee, forgive us our sins.